Trauma has a way of convincing us that disrespect is the price we pay to feel safe, loved, or accepted. But here's the good news. Just because you've learned to endure it doesn't mean you can't unlearn it. Predatory trauma often teaches us that we're worth less than others. It's a sneaky belief that settles in, whispering, "This is just how people treat you." Sometimes it feels like your value has been edited down, like you're a footnote in someone else's story. And I get it. When your experiences tell you over and over that your needs don't matter, you start to believe it. You internalize this unspoken rule that your worth is somehow conditional, dependent on how much you can endure without making waves. Here's the thing, trauma rewires your sense of worth in ways that are both profound and honestly a little heartbreaking. I've spoken to so many people who say they feel invisible, like they're walking through life with a sign that says, "It's okay to treat me however you want." They tolerate disrespect, not because they're weak, but because somewhere along the way, they learned that love and acceptance come at a cost. It's almost as if they're constantly paying off some invisible debt, hoping that being agreeable, quiet, or forgiving enough will eventually earn them the kindness they crave. One of the most common stories I hear is about people staying in toxic relationships, not because they don't know it's toxic, but because they've convinced themselves that this is the best they can do. Or worse, they believe that if they just try harder, love more, or stay quieter, things will change. And when they don't, it only reinforces the belief that they must be the problem. That's how trauma works. It flips the script, making you believe that being mistreated is your fault. Research supports this too. Studies on trauma survivors show that people who've endured consistent invalidation like emotional neglect or verbal abuse often develop a skewed perception of their own value. They adapt by lowering their expectations, telling themselves that respect and kindness are luxuries, not necessities. It's a survival mechanism because when you're in a situation where asserting your needs results in rejection or conflict, you start to believe that being small and compliant is safer. But here's what I want you to hear. Your worth is not determined by how others have treated you. Your value is inherent, and no amount of disrespect can take that away. Trauma might have tricked you into thinking otherwise, but it doesn't get the final say. Healing starts when you begin to challenge that voice in your head that says you're not enough. It's a slow process, sometimes unbearably slow, but every small step toward recognizing your worth is a victory. I know it's hard. Sometimes it feels like you're swimming upstream, trying to undo years of conditioning. You might even feel guilty for wanting more because trauma has a way of convincing you that wanting respect is selfish. But you are allowed to want better. You deserve people who see you, hear you, and value you. Not because you've earned it by being resilient or agreeable, but because you're human. So when you catch yourself tolerating less than you deserve, take a breath, acknowledge that old familiar feeling, the one that says you should just accept it. Then remind yourself you're allowed to take up space, you're allowed to ask for respect, and most importantly, you're allowed to believe that you're worthy of it. The journey to reclaiming your worth is messy and uncomfortable. It means confronting the ways trauma has shaped your beliefs about yourself. But every time you choose respect over acceptance, every time you decide not to settle, you're rewriting your story. You're teaching yourself and the world around you that your worth is not up for negotiation. It's not easy, but it's possible. And you're not doing it alone. Now, here's the paradox. Even when disrespect hurts, it can feel familiar, and familiarity can feel safe. I know that sounds counterintuitive, right? Why would anyone willingly stay in a situation that makes them feel small, unseen, or unimportant? But that's how our brains work. We're wired to seek consistency. And when you've spent years in environments where disrespect was the norm, your brain starts to file that behavior under norm. It's like your nervous system says, this is what relationships are supposed to feel like. I remember talking to someone who described feeling more comfortable in relationships where they had to prove themselves constantly. They said, if someone is just nice to me right off the bat, I don't trust it. It feels fake. That's trauma talking. Trauma teaches us to brace for impact, to expect the other shoe to drop. When you've spent years in relationships where love was unpredictable or conditional, someone being consistently kind feels almost disorienting. So you start questioning their motives or looking for hidden flaws because consistency isn't familiar, it's unsettling. So here's what's happening on a physiological level. Your brain craves patterns. When the pattern has been disrespect, chaos, or conditional love, that's what feels comfortable even when it hurts. It's as if your nervous system has adapted to handle chaos better than calm. Safety feels suspicious, like something you can't fully trust. So when disrespect shows up, it feels oddly reassuring, like, oh, I know how to handle this. This is why it can be so confusing when someone genuinely cares for you or respects your boundaries. You might find yourself sabotaging it without fully understanding why. It's not because you don't want to be treated well, you do. It's just that your brain hasn't learned to rest in kindness. Your body hasn't learned to believe in stability. That's not a failure on your part. It's just your survival instincts doing what they were trained to do. But recognizing this pattern is the first step toward breaking it. Just because your brain has made disrespect familiar doesn't mean you're destined to live with it forever. One of the most powerful things you can do is start identifying the discomfort that comes with being treated well. Acknowledge that feeling. Say to yourself, this feels weird because it's new, not because it's wrong. You're literally teaching your brain to recalibrate, to understand that calm and respect are not threats. One way to practice this is by noticing small acts of kindness and allowing yourself to lean into them. Let yourself feel the awkwardness of being valued without immediately trying to dismiss it. I know that's easier said than done. You might think, I'm just waiting for them to change their mind, or this kindness won't last. But give yourself permission to stay in that moment, even if it feels uncomfortable. The more you practice this, the more your brain will start to see respect as normal rather than suspicious. It's important to remember that healing isn't just about saying, I deserve better. It's also about teaching your nervous system to believe it. That means intentionally surrounding yourself with people who treat you with kindness, even if it feels unfamiliar at first. It means noticing when you're pulling away from something good because it feels too easy or too calm. Lean into that discomfort. Remind yourself that being valued doesn't have to come with strings attached or hidden costs. The bottom line is this: you're not flawed for seeking comfort in familiar pain. That's just a survival response. But you're also not powerless to change it. You have the capacity to teach yourself a new normal. One where respect feels natural and love doesn't come with a sense of dread. It takes time and it takes patience with yourself. But each time you choose to accept respect instead of rejecting it, you're reminding your heart and mind that you deserve to feel safe and valued. And that's worth fighting for. I know what you're thinking. If I stand up for myself, people will think I'm difficult, dramatic, or too much. I hear this all the time from people who've spent their lives trying to keep the peace, avoiding conflict, and making sure everyone else feels comfortable, even if it means sacrificing their own well-being. Trauma survivors in particular often carry this deeply rooted fear of being perceived as a problem. They've been trained, sometimes by the very people who were supposed to love and protect them, that asserting themselves is selfish or even shameful. Let's talk about shame for a moment because it's at the heart of this fear. Shame is that voice that says, who do you think you are? It convinces you that asking for respect, setting boundaries, or simply saying no makes you ungrateful or selfish. The reality is that trauma doesn't just hurt in the moment it happens. It leaves these lingering beliefs that shape how we interact with the world. One of those beliefs is that your feelings are a burden and standing up for yourself makes you difficult to love. I once spoke with a woman who said that every time she tried to express how someone's words hurt her, she was met with eye rolls or comments like, you're so sensitive. Over time, she started believing that her reactions were the problem, not the disrespect itself. So she stopped speaking up. She became the easygoing, never rock the boat person who absorbed everyone else's stress without ever expressing her own. She convinced herself that this made her strong, but really it just made her exhausted. That's how shame operates. It makes you think that enduring disrespect without complaint is a virtue. It tells you that being easy to love means never making waves. And when we're talking about trauma, that belief gets magnified because you've already been taught that your needs are secondary. Maybe you grew up in a home where expressing your feelings meant being punished or ignored. Or perhaps you were in a relationship where setting boundaries led to arguments or even abandonment. Your brain learns to associate advocacy for yourself with loss or danger. The hard part is that once you internalize this, it feels almost impossible to change. You might find yourself in situations where you desperately want to speak up but can't. Your body freezes, your heart races, and your mind goes blank because conflict feels too risky. Or you might find yourself apologizing even when you're the one who's been hurt, just to keep the peace. But here's the truth you need to hear. Setting boundaries isn't about being difficult. It's about being human. It's about recognizing that your feelings matter and that allowing disrespect, whether it's subtle or overt, is not a price you have to pay to be loved. The problem isn't your sensitivity. The problem is that you've been told sensitivity is a flaw. The problem isn't that you have needs, it's that you've been convinced those needs make you less likable or lovable. Learning to unhook from this belief takes practice and self-compassion. Start by acknowledging when that shame voice pops up. Notice how it tells you to stay quiet, to minimize your hurt, or to just let things go for the sake of harmony. Then challenge it. Ask yourself, really? Am I really being difficult or am I just being honest? Sometimes just that small act of questioning can loosen shame's grip. Practice advocating for yourself in small ways first. Maybe it's saying, actually, that joke hurt my feelings, or I need a little space right now. It's going to feel uncomfortable at first, like you're stepping way out of line. But each time you do it, you're teaching yourself that your voice matters. You're giving yourself permission to be seen and heard without apology. And here's the thing, that people who truly value you will respect your boundaries. They might not get it right away, especially if they're used to you being agreeable all the time. But real relationships are resilient enough to handle honesty. If someone decides you're too much simply because you asked to be treated with respect, that's not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of their inability to meet you where you are. So yes, sometimes people might call you difficult or dramatic when you stand up for yourself. Let them. Your job is not to shrink yourself into a version that everyone else finds manageable. Your job is to be whole, to honor your own needs, and to let go of the guilt that tells you otherwise. You are allowed to take up space, even if that space makes others uncomfortable. You're not too much. You're just finally choosing to be enough for yourself. Sometimes we find ourselves chasing approval from people who consistently disrespect us, hoping that if we're good enough, they'll change. It's that familiar cycle, giving more, bending more, being more accommodating, because there's this tiny, persistent hope that one day they'll see our worth. That one day they'll finally treat us the way we've been longing to be treated. But here's the hard truth. That's a trauma response. It's not weakness or desperation, it's survival. Somewhere along the way, we learned that love, acceptance, and respect are things we have to earn. Maybe it started in childhood when affection was only given when you achieved something or when you stayed quiet and agreeable. Or maybe it was in a relationship where love was doled out based on how much you sacrificed. Whatever the origin, the message was clear. You have to work for love. It's exhausting, isn't it? I've heard stories from people who pour themselves into relationships, romantic, familial, even professional, thinking that if they just try harder, things will get better. They find themselves thinking, if I can just show them how kind I am, how patient I can be, maybe they'll finally appreciate me. But instead of being met with gratitude or respect, they're met with more demands, more criticism, and more disregard. And when that happens, the shame kicks in. It tells you that you're not trying hard enough or that you're somehow failing at being good enough to be loved. So you double down, you give more, compromise more, and silence your own needs more. Because maybe, just maybe, that's what it takes. The sad part is, the more you chase approval from someone who refuses to give it, the more you lose sight of your own value. It's like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. No matter how much you pour in, it's never enough. But here's what I want you to understand. You don't have to convince anyone to respect you. Your worth isn't dependent on whether someone else sees it or values it. And trying to get validation from someone who is committed to misunderstanding you is not just exhausting, it's impossible. You're not in charge of making someone treat you right. You're only in charge of deciding what you're willing to accept. One of the most profound realizations in healing is recognizing that love doesn't have to be earned. Real love doesn't make you chase it or question whether you deserve it. Respect doesn't come with conditions or prerequisites. Healthy relationships don't feel like a test you have to constantly pass. When you find yourself overextending, take a step back and ask, why am I working so hard for something that should come naturally? I know it's easier said than done. We're human. We want to feel valued and accepted. But the truth is, not everyone will see your worth. Some people are so caught up in their own narratives that they can't or won't see what you bring to the table. It's not your job to convince them. Your job is to believe in your own value enough to walk away when someone repeatedly shows you they don't. That's not giving up. It's honoring yourself. It's saying, I'm done proving my worth to someone who doesn't appreciate it. And yes, that decision might come with loss. Maybe it's a relationship you've invested years in, or a friendship that's become more draining than supportive. But letting go of something that diminishes you is not a failure. It's an act of courage. It's choosing to no longer pour yourself into something that's not pouring back. Healing from this pattern means learning to stop apologizing for wanting to be treated with kindness and respect. It means realizing that the right people, the ones who genuinely care, won't need convincing. They'll see your heart without you having to prove anything. And they won't make you feel like loving you is a chore. You are allowed to stop chasing people who take you for granted. You are allowed to expect respect without having to justify why you deserve it. And when you start to believe that, you'll find that your circle might get smaller, but it will also get healthier. You'll surround yourself with people who meet you halfway rather than making you do all the running. Because love is not a performance. It's not about earning or convincing. It's about being seen, valued, and cherished just as you are. And you deserve that without question, without condition. The way forward is through boundaries, gentle, clear, and consistent ones. Boundaries that say, I love myself enough to not tolerate less than I deserve. I know that for many of us, the word boundary itself feels daunting. Maybe it conjures up images of confrontation, hurt feelings, or even loss. If you've spent your life being the one who bends, accommodates, or avoids conflict at all costs, setting a boundary can feel almost unnatural, like you're suddenly speaking a foreign language. But boundaries aren't about building walls to keep people out. They're about creating space to protect what matters most: your sense of self, your peace of mind, and your emotional well-being. Boundaries are an act of self-respect, not selfishness. They're a declaration that your needs matter just as much as anyone else's. It's not about rejecting others, it's about refusing to reject yourself. I once spoke with someone who said that every time they tried to set a boundary, they'd end up over-explaining, almost apologizing for needing one in the first place. They felt guilty, worried that their boundary would make the other person uncomfortable or upset. I get it. If you've been conditioned to put others first, prioritizing your own well-being can feel like a betrayal. You might worry that you'll be seen as difficult or demanding. And if you've faced pushback before, maybe from people who thrived on your lack of boundaries, it's easy to think that keeping the peace means sacrificing yourself. But here's the thing, boundaries don't have to be loud, forceful, or harsh. In fact, the most powerful boundaries are often the simplest. I can't make it tonight. That joke isn't funny to me. Please don't talk to me that way. You don't need to over-justify or convince anyone why your boundary matters. You just need to be clear, calm, and consistent. It's also important to remember that not everyone will respond positively to your boundaries, especially if they've been used to you saying yes to everything. Some people will push back. They might question your motives or accuse you of changing. And honestly, they're right. You are changing. You're changing how you show up in your own life. You're prioritizing your needs and refusing to settle for relationships that only thrive when you're silent. That change can be uncomfortable for people who've grown comfortable with your lack of limits. What you need to know is that this discomfort isn't a sign you're doing something wrong. It's proof that you're choosing yourself, probably for the first time in a long time. And it's okay if it feels strange or scary. It's okay if your heart races when you say no or when you push back against disrespect. You're rewiring your brain to understand that being good to yourself is not an act of rebellion, it's an act of love. Sometimes setting boundaries means letting go of people who refuse to respect them. That's a hard truth to swallow, especially if you've invested years into certain relationships. But holding on to connections that demand you sacrifice your dignity or peace isn't love, it's self-abandonment. You deserve relationships where your boundaries are not only accepted, but respected. The right people won't make you feel guilty for protecting your well-being. And remember, boundaries aren't just about keeping harmful people out. They're about inviting healthy interactions in. When you practice setting boundaries, you're also modeling self-respect to the people who genuinely care about you. You're showing them that mutual respect is the foundation of connection. You're giving them a chance to love you in a way that honors your whole self. Sometimes we think that setting boundaries means being tough or unyielding, but the reality is it takes more courage to say this is what I need than it does to keep pretending everything is fine. It takes more bravery to risk being misunderstood than to keep quiet and preserve the status quo. But the cost of silence is too high when it comes to your own well-being. Healing from trauma means recognizing that your comfort and safety are just as important as anyone else's. It means allowing yourself to have preferences, needs, and limits without feeling like you're being unfair. Every time you choose to set a boundary, you're reinforcing that you matter. You're reminding yourself that your needs are not a burden. They're valid, essential, and worthy of being honored.